Hello viewers, 4DIYers here with another video for everyone. In this video here I'll be going over my experiences with owning my 2010 BMW 335d after 2 years. To start off, this is a well kept car and the previous owner had it since it was a couple years old. I am the third owner. This car only had 165,000 kilometers on it when I bought it. I will be covering all the areas beyond basic maintenance such as oil changes and air filters. When I first bought this car, it did need some work for safety. This included having issues with the DEF system, a glow plug module fault, and needing rear struts. First was tackling the glow plug module. I purchased glow plugs as well, as the engine was already apart and its preventative maintenance. This does involve removing the upper intake along with a bunch of other components. While I did have it apart, it was a good idea that I did clean the intake for any carbon buildup. To my surprise, this wasn't as bad. This will most likely vary between vehicles. I will admit removing the intake is a tedious job due to the puzzle-like assembly of the engine bay and working in awkward spaces like removing the module. I'm used to working on older BMWs where they do have a bit more room. Due to the air intake being removed, I also purchased new gaskets, as it was a wise choice not to reuse the old ones. Costs will vary depending on what parts you buy. I would highly recommend sticking with manufacturers who produce the parts for BMW. That still keeps the OEM quality while avoiding the price tag with the BMW stamp. BMWs do tend to be a bit picky with electronic components, so it's best not to cheapen out on this stuff. After this job, the total parts required were 5 new glow plugs, a glow plug module, and new intake gaskets. For cleaning the intake, I used a garbage can and made my own hot soak setup. Next was the rear struts and bushings. While it was apart, it was a no-brainer to install new bushings, so I wouldn't have to revisit this after. I went with polyurethane upper bushings as the E90 is known to have some sway in the back end, and this is a common solution. Unlike the engine, this was an extremely easy replacement. I did require buying E-torque sockets that I didn't own. The parts for this job required lower shock mounts, new shocks, bump stops, and upper shock mounts. Finally, the DEF fluid system needed to be addressed as it wasn't working correctly and there was a code for it. This is the urine injection system that goes into the exhaust to reduce emissions. This also wasn't an overly fun job due to its location. I do have videos for the other areas, however I'm still working on this one. The exhaust is required to be dropped down. The DEF tank is located just above the mufflers where the spare tire would be. The floor pan also needs to be removed in order to access the pump and lines. The floor pan is not only bolted into place from the inside of the trunk, but also underneath just above the exhaust. The DEF fluid is known to crystallize if the car sits, and this can cause the pump to not function, as well as plug the lines and injector at the exhaust. Hot water is used to melt the crystallization. This is the only way to flush the lines and other components. Once done, if you have BMW ISTA, you can test out the pump and injector to ensure it's working correctly. Due to the battery dying partway through my scan, this messed up my FRM module. I will fully admit this was my own fault and something which I never experienced before with my past vehicles I've owned. Thankfully, I did find somebody locally to reprogram my old module, so it was a relatively easy fix. Once on the road, I didn't experience any problems for quite some time. I have taken the car on longer distances and it never missed a beat. For fuel economy, it's excellent despite my driving style. About 70% highway and 30% city, I'm averaging around 30.5 US miles per gallon or 7.7 liters per 100 kilometers. The fuel economy does increase in the warmer months and can also increase if I'm doing a straight couple-hour drive on a highway with no stops. This has a huge savings when compared to driving my Dodge Ram. The fuel savings alone are worth paying the insurance and maintenance for an extra vehicle. The next problem that arose was a squealing serpentine belt. It would randomly start squealing, and I already knew that my harmonic balancer was due for a replacement due to some cracking. This is a common problem on these cars. With the replacement, again it's a tight spot to work in. Right after I got the car back together and took it for a test drive, my crank sensor decided to fail. Again, not the funnest thing to replace, as your line of sight is quite limited once your hands are in place around the sensor. If you haven't seen it already, I do have a video for this replacement. Thankfully, it wasn't overly expensive. My car has now 186,000 kilometers after sorting out a few things. I do really enjoy this car. With used car purchases, it's always common to run into unexpected faults that need to be addressed. With me driving the car all year around, I did make sure it was properly protected from rust. With almost a perfect 50-50 weight ratio, it handles amazing and is surprisingly good in the snow. There has been times where I was pushing snow with this car, while it was a white knuckle drive, it still got me home. I have heard from some that this generation of BMW is cheaply made than compared to the previous generations. I will admit the cup holders are terrible, just like any other BMW I've been in or owned, but as for the rest of the interior, I don't see any issues. I did notice recently that the wood grain interior is actually fake plastic instead of an actual laminate compared to the older ones. Overall, I do have to say I look forward to putting loads of miles on this car, enjoying it every second. It's a blast to drive. The power of the M57 is unlike any other car I've owned or driven. It does have the typical diesel tone, but is quite quiet in the car, and even at a higher RPM, the engine is still relatively quiet and smooth. Do you currently or have you owned in the past a BMW 335d? Please be sure to share your experiences in the comments below. New videos are released every week on my channel. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button, it's a huge help to me. And if you're not a subscriber, be sure to also hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.